Hello everyone, welcome on back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity, the Elite Specialization blog post update with the upcoming changes to all the Elite specs. Are we excited? We're here on Twitch chat as well, so we have some chat interactions. The initial post reads, today we're going to go over the feedback we received and what changes we're making to each Elite Specialization for launch. This blog will outline what we feel are the most impactful changes at a broad level. The full list of changes will be detailed in the expansion release notes. To kick things off, received feedback during the beta that some of the Elite Specialization emblems didn't represent the mechanics and themes as they were presented. To better align the art and design, we'll be updating the icons for the Antiquary and Luminary. They have updated icons in the past, specifically for Heart of Thorns. That was genuinely like very, very early on, so much so that I feel like it's kind of lost lore in regards to the emblems. But seeing them do this again in a more modern setting is actually quite cool. So we have the Amalgam. First and foremost, we're going to be talking about Engineer, which I think was very well received, chat. I think Engineer was very well received in the beta. I know I had a great time playing it, and I saw quite a bit of people playing the Amalgam. So they say that in regards to feedback, the Amalgam landed in a solid state for the beta. Along with some balance tuning, Amalgam is receiving a new Grandmaster trait, replacing Contagious Mutation, which shared strain bonuses to allies. Contagious Mutation was a niche trait compared to its neighbors, and its existence limited the effects we could put on strains, as we had to consider them being given to allies. Contagious Mutation's removal allows us to keep strains strong and interesting, while also making room for a new Grandmaster that can open up a new role for Amalgam. The new Grandmaster trait, New Genes, I also could use some New Genes, provides boons to allies when a morph skill is used, as well as an additional boon based on which specific morph skill was used. In PvE, the generic boon will be Alacrity, allowing the Amalgam to mold into a more supportive playstyle. With these gameplay changes as well as some visual effect updates, it's never been a better time to slime. Slime time prime. I'm very happy with all these. Amalgam was good, like from the jump, I would say. So seeing them refine it a little bit more is always great to see. I gotta say, the Contagious Mutation trait I actually did love because it was so wild and out there. Antiquary. They've taken steps to reduce the amount of guesswork required while playing the Antiquary. For starters, they've split deck trait, or made the split deck trait a baseline mechanic when the Elite Specialization is equipped. You'll now always obtain one offensive and one defensive artifact whenever you pilfer, regardless of the traits that you have equipped. All artifacts now additionally give unique temporary passive effects to the Antiquary after activation, allowing for additional strategic choices even after the corresponding artifact has been used. As an example, using the guitar, I love that they're using the guitar as an example, the one thing that people were maybe the most against. The guitar grants an effect that allows the Antiquary to use sneak attacks for a short period of time, even when not in stealth. Wow, that's actually really strong. Traits have also been reworked. Split Deck has been replaced with Repeat Ransacker, which reduces the recharge of Scrit Swipe whenever you use an artifact. Possessive Hoarder has had its boons altered and now grants its effects to allies around you as well. Lastly, Double Edge skill icons, these are the utility skills, now have a different appearance whenever they can be used while on cooldown to differentiate them from regular skill cooldowns. I liked Antiquary in the beta as well. I liked the RNG aspect, so seeing them refine it a little bit more is really cool. They're taking away a little bit of that RNG in terms of just making it where you are always getting one offensive and one defensive, which I was kind of expecting, but you know, hey. Next, we're going to be talking about Revenant, the Conduit. The majority of the feedback on Conduit gameplay revolved around the Conduit's profession mechanics and bonuses being too passive. As a result, we've made several changes to this Elite Specialization to make it more rewarding for players who wish to play the Conduit more proactively. Cosmic Wisdom has been moved to the F3 slot, and their effects have been altered to provide bonuses specifically for the legend that each form represents. As an example, Form of the Assassin now fires lesser enchanted daggers at enemies close to you whenever you use a legendary assassin skill, or while channeling Impossible Odds. Invoking a different legend will now automatically switch your form to match the new legend, ensuring that you'll always be able to make use of the new functionality of Cosmic Wisdom, even when moving to a different legend. How are we feeling about that? In place of Cosmic Wisdom, Release Potential has been added to the F2 slot. These are a new set of skills that are automatically equipped depending on your active legend, so players will have access to 2 different Release Potential skills based on the legends you bring to combat. Certain aspects of these skills will scale based on the amount of affinity you have built up. Okay, so affinity is actually being used as a more proactive resource. Cool. Encouraging the use of other legend skills before this one to obtain the maximum effect. Builder Spenders. Builder Spenders. Release Potential Assassin is an attack that sends out 3 increasingly large shockwaves from yourself that damages enemies and immobilizes them. Or immobilizes those that are struck by all 3 waves, with increased damage and greater immobilized duration, depending on how much affinity you have accumulated. All right. So I think the biggest issue really was the profession mechanic for Conduit. The new legend Raza seems pretty cool. Could also maybe use a little bit of refinement, but overall, I liked the idea of a more quote-unquote like passive Revenant legend or spec, where it's a lot of passive bonuses and whatnot. Now, this also makes me wonder what they've done with the traits, because those traits were so ingrained in all of those passive bonuses and giving you additional passive bonuses. It would be kind of nice if there was still a trait that lingers within the Conduit that is like, you will regain those passive bonuses when you have that trait equipped, just as like a little callback to the beta version of Conduit. So we'll have to see how Conduit feels now that it's been given a little extra love. Evoker doesn't have that much of like written down, which I'm a little scared for, because I feel like Evoker, while very cool and thematically very cool, is a little bit weaker in regards to a lot of their skills. For Evokers, a big point of feedback was that the Evoker trait line tried to do too many things. The element-themed traits were flavorful and helped to further define the playstyle of each familiar, but they took up a lot of space that could be used for other things, like addressing the lack of support boons. We still like what most of these traits brought to each of the familiars, so we've decided to make them passive bonuses tied to each familiar. For example, while you're accompanied by the Otter, you will always heal allies when you grant them regeneration. And then, as we mentioned in the preview stream for the Evoker, we suspected that the utility skills bonuses could be more than a stun break, and the majority of the feedback we saw agreed. So we went ahead with some improvements to those. They don't give us any examples. Unfortunate. We also saw a ton of feedback asking for the ability to enable auto attack for familiar skills. Our initial investigation found that this would require a complex technical change and need more time to ensure quality and stability, but rest assured that is a high priority for the team, and we'll release it as soon as it's ready. Okay, next we have Gale Shot, which I thought was one of my favorites. It was certainly top 3. So I haven't read anything in regards to the Gale Shot, so I'm a little nervous as to what they're going to be tackling. So Gale Shot aimed high and shot true over the beta week. Nice. There's always room for improvement, so here's a bird's eye view of the adjustments we've made. The largest change will be to Gale Shot's arrow generation. Gaining arrows was largely a passive experience, and there weren't enough options to add arrow generation to your build. I agree, actually. In the beta, we saw that in PvE, most of Gale Shot's strength came from triggering the Shrike Grandmaster trait rapidly. We are happy to see Gale Shot reward the projectile-focused builds we saw utilizing Shrike, but we want to make sure playstyles built around the other Grandmasters are also viable. Shrike's arrow-generating capabilities are going to be lowered, and Squall skills will now grant arrows on use. This will help the Grandmaster trait stay in parity with each other, while also making arrow generation a more active process. I completely agree, and I actually thought they were going to have the Squall skills granting arrows be more of a trait, but making that like into the skills baseline, kind of nice. Additionally, Fetch, the master trait that also aided in arrow generation, is being reworked to Thrill of the Catch, gaining an arrow when you or your pet disable an enemy. Rangers love disables. Y'all love a disable. Y'all love, like, if you interrupt, if you stun, if you immobilize, you just do a bunch of stuff and gain a bunch of benefits. Squall skills will also see usability changes, such as Whirlwind breaking stuns, Perfect Storm being castable while moving. Oh, I kind of like that you weren't able to move, but... And Mistral becoming a dome. Oh. In competitive modes only, Quarry's Peril and Pelt will grant 2 Wind Force stacks to make it easier to access Hawkeye, in higher pressure situations. Lastly, the Cyclone Bow will now remember when it's been set to auto attack. I also wouldn't mind seeing those traits be updated to increase the radius of quickness generation, but that's just me. That's just me. Next, let's talk about a class that I think really needs it and was one of the most disappointing out of the beta, along with all the other heavies, funnily enough. It is the Luminary Guardians. While reviewing the Luminary feedback, we saw a few of the same points being repeated consistently. The lack of Luminary-specific virtues, the penalty for using too many Radiant weapons, and the low impact of the weapons themselves are the main issues we're addressing. We've introduced a set of Radiant virtues to replace the core Guardian virtues. We still wanted to capture some of the feeling of core virtues with shorter cooldowns and instant effects, but they will bring a bit more to the table. Each of the virtues will also power up the next usage of their respective Radiant weapon, with Virtue of Justice empowering the hammer, Resolve the staff, and Courage the sword and the shield. Makes sense, makes sense. And then for the mechanic, our initial goal with the Shroud's recharge time, which scaled with the number of weapons used, had been to create more flexibility to dip from a single Radiant weapon. For example, using the shield to block an attack and then immediately exiting with a shorter cooldown. It became clear that scaling past a typical recharge time disincentivized interacting with the Shroud too much and felt like a significant penalty beyond our original intent. I completely agree. We've reduced the maximum recharge time to 10 seconds, 15 in competitive modes, while continuing to grant a reduced recharge for unused weapons. Okay, so you're still getting they're still sticking to this, but they're just reducing the baseline to 10 seconds, so it won't feel as bad. This will allow players to still get a small recharge reduction while using a single weapon without the downside of an excessive recharge time when utilizing the full suite. Finally, Radiant Shroud has been renamed Radiant Forge. Perfect! Perfect. This was not a shroud whatsoever. This was always just like a forge. Like a, very much like the Photon Forge. This was a Radiant Forge. It's a different take on a forge mechanic where you're dipping in to get access to different weapons, different, attacks. I still think it could have been a little bit more interesting, mechanically speaking, because the thing with Photon Forge is that you're building up your photon energy to do different things, to have empowered abilities. Your traits will interact with that gauge. It doesn't seem like they are adding a gauge to Radiant Forge just yet, but maybe in the future if they are looking to add another level of complexity to the Luminary. Because as it is right now, it's not as exciting of a change as I was maybe expecting. So all in all, it's better, but still it doesn't excite me as much as maybe the other elite specializations. Next, we're going to talk about Paragon. Paragon feedback was largely focused on a few key areas. Mainly, utility skills lacked impact, some traits felt like a bit plain, and adrenaline was hard to come by. Absolutely. We did a pass on the utility skills to add some additional value. Brace Yourselves now also grants protection to allies, while granting bonus adrenaline to the Paragon on both activation and echo. We Shall Return and Find Their Weakness also grant some bonus adrenaline on their respective echoes, which we expect to play well with the reverberation trait to fuel the Paragon's chance. Feverish Pulse lacked depth for a Grandmaster trait, so we folded in the effects of Brisk Pacing to give it some additional power. This also frees up a slot in the Master tier for an additional damage-focused trait, as we saw a lot of feedback that the Paragon's damage potential wasn't quite there yet. This will be interesting. Strengthening Stanzas moves out of the Grandmaster tier to fill that slot, making room for a new Grandmaster trait with a bit more active gameplay. This trait will grant bonus damage based on the current motivation tier, the same 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 8, or 7 through 10 thresholds we used by chance, rewarding good resource management with a nice damage increase. Okay, that's nice actually. When it comes to its support playstyles, I'm interested to see how that alacrity generation feels, because it was once again only on the change of the chant. It wasn't on the activation. You have to activate one to then get to another one, which will then proc alacrity. So it was a bit more steps you had to go through to get the same effect that other classes can just immediately pop on their allies. Next, penultimately, we're going to talk about Necromancer's Ritualists. Ritualist Shroud lacked some impact, with a lot of its damage coming from the spirit's auto attacks. We're putting a bit more damage into the Shroud skills themselves, and adjusting some cooldowns to give some more incentive to stick around in Shroud for a longer period of time. Summon spirits, while bringing a good amount of utility with its teleport and ability to reposition the spirits, felt too simple when compared to the other iconic 5th Shroud skills. It will still teleport and bring the spirits along with you, but instead of causing them to perform an auto attack, each spirit will now use a new, unique skill. Anguish will fire out a quick flurry of projectiles, Wanderlust will launch a larger projectile that dazes nearby enemies, and Preservation will create a protective barrier that destroys enemy projectiles. I'm interested to see how the projectiles work, because the 5th ability is a teleportation to a location. It's not an enemy target thing. So how are those projectiles going to be coded? Rupture skills, the F2 through 4 skills. Yes, I want to see these be changed. Rupture skills brought powerful effects, but tearing down spirits was slightly opposed to the core fantasy of summoning and maintaining the spirits. That's a great thing to bring up. We've rebranded them as innervation skills. For example, Innervate Anguish, to give ritualists the feeling of channeling powers through your spirits. The effects are still the same, but using the skills will no longer destroy the respective spirit. I love that change, actually. That's such a simple but thematically flavorful change. I think will make Ritualist Shroud feel a little bit more, I don't know, useful to stay in. So you can like get those casts of your, resummoning your spirits without having to sacrifice them first. And you get to like just play around with those abilities a bit more, which will be really nice to see. So I think Ritualist is looking to be a little bit better. I still would have loved if this elite specialization was changed from quickness to alacrity, just to incentivize faster cooldowns to be able to summon your minions and your spirits a bit faster. I think alacrity benefits this spec more than quickness does. Which also kind of brings us to Troubadour in terms of the change of alacrity to quickness, which is not my favorite thing, but we will talk about that in a second. Troubadour. Troubadour is seeing changes across the board after its beta performance fell a little flat. Did it? Did people think Troubadour fell flat? I didn't think so. I love Troubadour. It was my top 3. Reverberating loot is becoming lively loot, sending damaging sound waves towards your enemy, while also sending healing tones toward your allies. I wonder if this is going to have an ally target feature, where I'm imagining the projectile will just deal damage and also heal. The Harmonious Harp is being updated to function as a channeled skill, having its healing condensed to give a more powerful impact feel, while also granting distortion at baseline. Is being updated to function as a channeled skill, having its healing condensed to give a more impactful feel, while also granting distortion at baseline. Oh, so it's going to be pulsing healing, rather than just like a big burst heal, which is what I think it used to do. I like that. This allows the Troubadour's Harp to be a strong healing tool, while their loot can handle smaller amounts of more frequent healing. Okay. Tails and their performance bonuses are being adjusted. For the healing and utility tails, the performance bonus will grant notes for playing their matching instrument, and the abilities themselves will always be full strength. This allows for more innate note generation, while also making their usage more flexible. There's a decent amount of trait adjustments, both small and large. The minor traits are being fully reworked. Symphonic Resonance now grants a unique bonus based on which instrument you're playing, such as movement speed with the drum or small pulse healing with the harp. I like that. That's actually pretty cool. Harmonize will now grant a note whenever you use a Phantasm skill to improve note generation even more. Troubadour is being changed from granting allies alacrity to granting quickness, and will do so with the new master trait, Life of the Party, which grants boons to allies affected by your lively loot or crescendo skills. Oh, it's a loot thing now. We hope that these changes we hope that with these changes, the next time you see a Troubadour, it will strike the right chord. I don't really love the change from quickness to alacrity, and also I guess putting it on the loot actually makes it much more useful, and also tying it to crescendo. I thought they were just going to give it to crescendo, which is where I would have put it, because it's the most it's the final profession ability for the Troubadour. But also tying it to the lively loot makes it to where you can actually have access to it a little bit faster, than, say, the harp. I think there are some very positive changes to Troubadour in regards to the instruments and also just, you know, refining the utility skills and the traits. My one downside is really just the change from quickness to alacrity. I don't think it needed it. I would have liked and preferred it to stay alacrity. It felt really good to always be able to upkeep alacrity, which you have this fun synergy with like reducing your cooldowns of your instruments so that you could get a crescendo. Very good positive changes, but also really big negative change for me. Really big negative change. Overall, I think that these updates are looking to be pretty good. Conduit seems the most exciting in terms of its mechanical change, because it started with basically nothing, and now it's getting something. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. The Evoker utility skills, I'm also intrigued to see what they have in mind when it comes to empowering those skills. I don't know why they haven't given us an example of one of those, but hey. And then also Luminary. It looks like it's going to be a little bit better, but I'm also worried about like if the profession mechanic is still going to feel as good as, say, something like the Photon Forge, and also if they're going to touch the traits to make it feel a little bit more specialized in what it's trying to do, which I also had some issues with the traits for Luminary, but I think Luminary has a little bit of a longer road to go than, say, the other elite specializations in this patch and batch of elite specializations. I'm excited to play in basically like 2 weeks' time until we get our hands on these elite specializations permanently, and we get to explore Visions of Eternity and head to the island of Castora. So thank you all so much for coming on by. Leave your comments down below in the description talking about any of the elite specs that caught your fancy and are maybe looking to be more impressive for you. And if you'd like to come on over to the Twitch, we are streaming here on Twitch playing Guild Wars 2 and other MMORPGs and RPGs in general. So we would love to have you. Thank you, thank you. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.